Hi everyone. I want you to read a couple short articles. I put them up again instead of having you buy an English 1B book. I'm trying to make it cheap. So there are a couple articles on this thoughtco.com website. They're written by English professors, so they're not that bad. Anyway, one of them looks like this. It's on the definition of a premise. It's very short, so please read it with some good examples too. And then this one here on the warrant, on what a warrant is. So you'll be adding those to your vocabulary list. By the way, these bonsais I'm being data mined for. I don't know what you get on yours when you click on it. Anyway, so you'll read those two articles, and then I will have this video available to you. And sorry, I'll have you watch this video. So I tried, hopefully I have the closed caption on, but it should record. I already did a practice run. This is during the Trump arraignment last week. Jordan Klepper, who works for The Daily Show, went down to the crowd, and he's really funny because I think what he does that's so funny is that he listens to people's arguments, and then he very quickly, I mean, he's prepared for it, but points out maybe some flaws in their logic, and then the audience laughs as the people realize that they've made some logical errors. So anyway, what I want you to do is to look at the argument that you made on your last paper, and I want you to break it down into these ideas of the premise, the conclusion, and the warrant. And sometimes the warrant is stated, sometimes it's not. Perhaps there are things that are unsaid, and so I just want you to break it down into the simplest of sentences to make the argument. So I thought I'd give you some examples here. So we'll just look at three little interactions that Klepper makes. Okay, and again, hopefully the sound works. So here we go.
Tuesday's arraignment of former President Donald Trump in New York was a first for the nation and brought out the passionate, the sensibly dressed, and the kind of men who really disappoint their mothers.
Two genders! Two genders! Two genders!
While I had fun getting into the scrum, I was surprised to find there were people who wanted to have meaningful conversations about the justice system.
I don't believe what you're seeing is justice.
You don't believe in the grand jury process?
I don't believe if this was a civilian, it would...
I mean, he is a civilian. He's a person with a New York
Okay.
address. So he shouldn't go through the grand jury process.
I believe it should be dismissed.
Because
Because I'm going by a general gut feeling.
All right, so let's look back at that. Again, how would I see this argument that the man in the blue Trump MAGA hat starts out with is he says he doesn't believe what we're seeing is justice because Trump is not a civilian. Again, I didn't use his exact words, but I try to restate his argument. So the premise that he starts with is that Trump is not a civilian. And so the conclusion is it's not fair or it's unjust for Trump to be arraigned or prosecuted. And so the unstated warrant there is that non-civilians should not be prosecuted in a state court. And then Klepper's argument is that Trump is a civilian, and he backs it. His evidence for that is that he has a New York address. I don't know that necessarily makes a person a civilian or not. So then the gentleman in the blue hat changes his argument, which is with the new premise that he has a gut feeling, so the case should be dismissed. And of course, the unstated warrant is if you don't like it, doesn't feel right, then it shouldn't happen. Which I think is kind of funny, and he probably, by being backed in a corner or seeing, the problem that with his argument that he said something he probably doesn't believe. Nevertheless, I think what's interesting is it doesn't matter. I mean, if I were Jordan Klepper and had more time, I would say, well, it doesn't matter whether you're a civilian or you're a member of the military. You don't even have to be a citizen of the United States. If you're from another country and you break a law here, you still could be prosecuted. And if you're in the military and you break a law outside of the military, you would be prosecuted by a civilian court. So that's how I would break that down to again the premises, the conclusions, and the warrants, and whether the warrants were stated or not. So again, that's what I want you to do with your last paper. So let's watch this next. The next argument with the man with the black Trump 2020 hat. Sorry, I did back up a little bit.
I'm going by a general gut feeling.
The way I see it is, the government is stepping over their bounds and doing what they're doing here, indicting Donald Trump. This stuff happens all the time.
What stuff? Paying off a porn star and then fudging business records?
I mean, come on, it's his own money for one thing.
And out of all the cases up against Donald Trump, this is probably the weakest one.
It's probably the weakest.
All right, so I'm ignoring the last part of that argument, but I would say that his first argument is that the government is overstepping, doing something outside of their jurisdiction, I suppose, in indicting Donald Trump. And then he says this happens all the time, and then he says, well, come on, it's his own money for one thing. So the premise is that paying someone that one had an affair with to be quiet about the affair and then hiding the payments as a business expense happens all the time. And then the conclusion is that the person shouldn't be prosecuted. So the unstated warrant there is that if something happens a lot, then the district attorney should ignore it or shouldn't prosecute it by saying it happens all the time. And then he changes to another stated warrant. He says because it was his own money, there should be no prosecution. Or as if because it was his own money, it's not illegal. And I don't know that he would actually really buy that someone's use of money, like to say buy drugs, illegal drugs or something like that, even if it's your own money, it's still illegal and you could be prosecuted. So that's where I think he goes with that. All right, let's look at one more. This one's kind of interesting. And by the way, again, you should know what these mean, the premise and the warrant. Premise is kind of like facts, the early statements that build up to a conclusion, and the warrant is how the argument is constructed, how it is arrived at. And so I'm going to go show you the video first.
Yeah.
There's no evidence to bring about this prosecution. So
Well, we don't know that until there's a grand jury who can then see that evidence.
Listen, I think that everyone should get a fair trial.
So you would support a grand jury looking at all of the evidence, and if they decide to indict Donald Trump, well, then we will let that happen.
Sure, certainly. If there's evidence, every piece of evidence should be.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's what happened here.
With this argument, he says there is no evidence, so there should be no prosecution. And, I think we would all agree with that. And then he states, his warrant that he states is everyone should get a fair trial. Then Jordan Klepper says that, well, there was a grand jury that looked at evidence and then decided that there should be an arraignment and an indictment to go forward with the prosecution. The criminal charges should be filed. So the new argument that he changed his mind. He said if there is evidence, it should be heard. So he was, his first premise, I would say, was false in his regard because he just stated that there was no evidence as a premise. And then later, he said if there is evidence, it should be heard. And so the unstated conclusion is that if the evidence suggested prosecution should go forward, he agreed to that when Klepper restated that. And his conclusion was, meaning that, yeah, I agree. So anyway, if you're a follower of Donald Trump and you really think this whole arraignment thing is a joke, That's totally fine. That's not what I'm looking at here. What I'm looking at is just a situation where there's a very short snippets of arguments being made, and how they change, how they are interacted with an interviewer, meant to help you with this next assignment. Okay.